Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Amy, and in today's video I'm going to be going through all you need to know about charcoal pencils for drawings. So if you are having a little bit of trouble with charcoal or are new to charcoal, then this video is packed full of helpful information to get you started. I'll be going through everything in this video, including the materials, paper, blending tools and highlights, as well as talking through techniques such as shading and values. So I do hope you find this video useful, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn the bell on if you are new around here. I upload loads of art content here on my channel every single week, so make sure you don't miss out on my latest uploads. But anyway, let's get started and jump in. So first up, let's talk about the materials. So the charcoal pencils I love to use are the General's charcoal pencils, which I am showing on the screen right now. And I love these pencils because they are affordable, but they're also good quality as well. And I find that I actually only really use 2 or 3 charcoal pencils in my drawings. So if you are a beginner, then using charcoal is a good option for you because you don't actually need a lot to go a long way. I'll normally just use a 2B and a 6B pencil, so I'll use my 2B for my lightest shades and I'll use a 6B to get in those darkest values and shadows. I will also use a charcoal block as well, and I'll use a charcoal block for larger areas, so for example backgrounds when I want to add value and shading to large surface areas. Now with charcoal brands, there are a lot of great options to choose from, but the one thing I would definitely recommend is not to buy unbranded charcoal sets like the one I'm showing right now. So you definitely want to pick a charcoal set that is recommended by other artists. Next, let's talk about paper. So it's very important that you choose paper that has the correct texture for charcoal. You want to be using a slightly textured paper for the charcoal to grip onto, because if you use a smooth surface paper, that charcoal will just slip straight off the paper and you won't end up with good results. So the Strathmore Bristol Smooth 300 series paper is not a great paper to use because it's too soft, so there's no grain for the charcoal to fill into. You want to have something with more grain for the charcoal to stick to. The Strathmore toned grey paper is a better option as it is vellum surface, but bear in mind it's toned paper, so you'll probably need to use a white charcoal pencil to preserve highlights. So that does mean if you don't have a white charcoal pencil, you're going to need to buy one if you're working on toned paper. Personally, I love to use the Fabriano aquarello paper, which is actually a hot pressed watercolour paper, and I use this paper because it has an ideal texture. So it's still quite smooth, but it has more texture to it than the first paper I showed, so that means that more charcoal will stay on the paper instead of being swept away. Okay, so now let's talk about the blending tools. Blending tools are really important when you're working with charcoal because blending adds depth, dimension and value to your piece, and I use several methods for blending. First of all, I use paintbrushes, and I will use the sable rounded brush head most of the time because they are angled so they can get into the creases, but also they have a slightly harder bristle so that they can easily blend charcoal. I will also use a selection of blending stumps, and I'll use tissue paper for larger surfaces. So firstly, I like to use paintbrushes most of the time for blending charcoal, and I find that not only do paintbrushes blend charcoal so well, but they also give quite a soft and subtle blending effect and will also blend out stubborn lines. Paintbrushes are also great for blending loose charcoal powder as well and creating lighter shading. I will also use blending stumps for shading and blending, and I tend to use blending stumps if I want to preserve my darker values, because I find that you can concentrate more pressure on blending stumps than you can with paintbrushes. So if you look at the difference there between using a paintbrush to using a blending stump, you definitely get a lot more darker values with a blending stump because you press more charcoal into the paper. And lastly, tissue paper. So I'll use tissue paper to blend out any large areas, so for example backgrounds, and I find that tissue paper is the most effective method for blending out harsh lines. However, one downside to using tissue paper is that it can pick up a lot of charcoal off the paper, and you can lose a lot of darker values if you blend with a clean tissue or apply too much pressure. The next thing I want to talk about is highlights. Now I use 3 different materials for creating highlights in charcoal drawings. I often use a white charcoal pencil over the top of charcoal, and I'll also use a kneaded eraser to lift charcoal off larger areas, and I'll also use the Tombo mono eraser for small details such as the highlights in the eye or fur texture. So let's give a little demonstration on how adding highlights to your drawing can really transform your piece. We will just start with using a kneaded eraser, and you can see just how effective this is for pulling up highlights. Kneaded erasers are probably one of my favourite tools for creating highlights in charcoal pencils because they are soft and gentle on the paper, and you don't need to apply a lot of pressure at all to create highlights. Next, we'll take a look at creating highlights with a white charcoal pencil. I really like using a white charcoal pencil for highlights, especially if I'm focusing on a small area or there are really bright highlights. So I find that the white charcoal pencil is so creamy and smooth and just gently glides over charcoal pencils, making it an easy way to pull up highlights in drawings. And lastly, we have the Tombo mono eraser, one of my favourite art tools for creating highlights. Its precise nib on the end makes it so easy to pull up highlights, and this eraser is so easy to clean as well. So if you want really sharp highlights, you can achieve that just by using the clean part of the eraser. So I think all of these methods are really effective for pulling up highlights in your charcoal drawings. Now we're going to move on to a quick little demonstration, and I drew a tulip in charcoal pencils, so I'll talk a little bit about my techniques for the background first. So what I did was I actually had a scrap bit of paper, and I drew onto the paper with a dark charcoal pencil and charcoal block to create a loose powder from the charcoal. Then I used my rounded brush head paintbrush to gently pick up some of that powder and start to shade in the background. I did also shade directly onto the background as well. Now with backgrounds, it's really important to build up all of your tone and value really lightly. So always start off light and work your way up to your dark values. Another important tip I have is to make sure that you don't apply hard pressure onto the paper at all. And the reason why you don't want to do this is because you want the charcoal to be able to blend smoothly and softly. And if you press hard down on the paper, you won't be able to do this. For the leopard, I really worked in stages, so I started by lightly sketching outlines, then blending the charcoal out gently before re-adding in dark values. Then when I was happy with how all of the fur texture and details were looking, I created highlights by mainly using the Tombo mono eraser to lift the fur and make the drawing pop. So it is essential with charcoal that you just take your time and combine different methods and techniques to get the most out of your charcoal pieces. So I really hope you did enjoy this video and picked up lots of helpful tips on how to use charcoal, as well as learning more about the materials, blending tools, and all the processes for charcoal drawings. If you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you are new around here, and make sure that you do turn on that bell as well to be notified of all my future uploads. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye everyone!